In June 2024, a 132-page handwritten diary suddenly leaked from the old mansion of the comedian and singer Jim Nabors. He was an American television icon in the 1960s. But inside those pages, it wasn't just ordinary confessions. Instead, they held secrets that had never been revealed. The diary recorded the names of 6 famous male Hollywood stars, 6 men who had quietly passed through Jim's life, leaving behind love, tears, and wounds that never healed. Some proposed to him in the shadows, some betrayed him right on the red carpet, and some used power and money to force him into lifelong silence. A comedian who made millions laugh, a singer whose voice captivated audiences. But behind the stage lights, he lived with threatening letters, forced contracts, and dreams of love that were always buried. So who were those 6 faces? And what did they do to make Jim Nabors cry right behind the curtains in Las Vegas? In 1978, we will start with a name that's no longer unfamiliar: Rock Hudson, the #1 masculine icon of Hollywood in the 1950s and 60s. When Rock Hudson's name appeared in Jim Nabors' diary, the entire newsroom at National Insider fell silent for 30 minutes to read to the last page. No one expected that the man revered by all of America as a symbol of masculinity had once knelt before Jim in a hotel room and given him a Cartier diamond necklace engraved with R and J, like a silent proposal. It all began in March 1972 at a private party in Palm Springs. Jim came with Doris Day while Rock approached and initiated conversation. Rumors about Rock being gay had been whispering throughout Hollywood, but no one had proof. The two sat together until 3 a.m., then quietly left through the back door. The next morning, Jim received a photo of Rock smiling brightly, along with a small note: "If you want, I can stop everything." And so, the secret romance began. For nearly 2 years, they lived like 2 men who had everything, but couldn't have each other. They often went to Maui, Hawaii, renting villas under the fake name John Martin. There, Rock was no longer the cold movie star, but just Roy, a shy man who liked to hug Jim from behind, listening to him sing opera in the bathroom. On Christmas Eve 1973, they sat together, drinking sake, and wrote an oral marriage contract with 3 vows: never lie, never use others to cover up. And if they broke up, say it directly to each other before the press knew. It was a rare moment when Jim believed he had found true love. But just 1 month later, everything shattered because of a photo. In January 1974, while the two were sunbathing by the pool, a young paparazzo named Billy Roth sneaked in and took 12 close-up photos. The most important one, Rock leaning down to kiss Jim's neck. That photo was sold to Confidential magazine for $50,000. That very night, Rock was summoned to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. No lawyers, no negotiations, just a brown envelope containing $30,000 in cash and a paper with the words, "End the relationship, create a new image in 10 days. Rock signed. 2 days later, Jim received a package. Inside was the Cartier necklace that had been proof of their love, now broken in half. No letter, no explanation. And then, in front of hundreds of cameras at the premiere of the film Avalanche Express, Rock Hudson appeared, holding hands with actress Luciana Paluzzi, declaring, "I've never been this happy." That night, Jim sat silently in his apartment, watching the 11 p.m. entertainment news. He wrote into his diary, "I once believed I was special, but it turns out I was just a pawn in the perfect PR play of the studio." And then vicious rumors began to spread that Jim and Rock had secretly held a gay wedding in Hawaii. Rock denied it. Universal denied it. Jim stayed silent. He canceled all his shows in Las Vegas for 3 months. In the diary, he left only a short sentence: "I don't want to sing anymore because every song reminds me of the one who used to sit in the front row." The first love, and also the first fall, extinguished Jim's faith. But what awaited him ahead was even darker and more brutal, because the next man to enter his life didn't bring a diamond necklace, but a broken rose and a threatening letter written in blood. Jim met Anthony for the first time in early 1968, backstage at the Golden Globe Awards at the Beverly Hilton. Jim sang French ballads, while Anthony, in a black velvet tuxedo, stood silently in the wings, his eyes never leaving him. After the performance, Anthony said only one sentence: "I never thought I could love anyone until I heard you sing." Just a few weeks later, the relationship began, quietly but passionately. They dated in cars, in nameless hotels in Malibu, and finally rented a small cabin in Big Sur. Jim called it the House of Two, no names needed. Mornings folding paper airplanes by the window, rainy nights lying down reading scripts, drinking cheap wine. For Jim, it was a dream. But that dream collapsed suddenly. On September 12, 1970, at Paramount Studios, while Jim was getting made up for a live TV show, a lighting technician found a strange envelope on the dressing table. No sender. Inside was a paper folded in three, with red smeared letters. "If you keep associating with that madman, both of you will be tied to chairs, doused in gasoline, and burned in the theater as an example." At first, everyone thought it was a cruel joke. But when Jim called Anthony and read the content, there was only silence on the other end. A silence that lasted more than 3 minutes before Anthony hung up. The next day, the cabin in Big Sur was returned. Late at night, a man pulling a large suitcase came to collect Anthony's things. Jim called continuously for a week. No one answered. When he went to the apartment in Los Feliz, he was stopped by a man in plain clothes, wearing a badge inside his jacket, who said, "Mr. Perkins doesn't want to be disturbed further. We can summon you if needed." Jim was stunned. He filed a report with the Los Angeles police, handing over the blood letter, but lacking fingerprints, lacking surveillance cameras, the case was quickly closed for lack of evidence. What hurt Jim more than the police's indifference was what happened 11 days later. On the evening of September 24, 1970, at the premiere of the film Catch-22 at the Chinese Theater, Anthony Perkins appeared, arm in arm with a young screenwriter named Barry Jameson, in front of the press. Anthony smiled politely, squeezed her hand tightly, then declared, "I'm living the happiest days. Who wouldn't be moved by Barry's talent and beauty?" Jim sat in front of the TV screen in the living room, holding a glass of wine but unable to take a sip. He cried so much that night he couldn't write a single line in the diary. It was only 2 days later that he left a short note. "The last hug still haunts me to this day. Norman Bates kills people in the movies, but in real life, Anthony Perkins killed me with silence and a fake smile." Ironically, many years later, a tabloid reporter revealed the truth. Barry Jameson wasn't any love. She was just an extra actress hired for $2,000 to appear with Anthony for 6 weeks, to dispel gay rumors. When the storm subsided, she disappeared from the entertainment world. Jim didn't disappear, but from then on, he no longer trusted anyone who easily entered his life, and it was that loss of trust that paved the way for the next romance. A romance that took place in glamorous Manhattan, seeming sweet at first, but then shattered right in the middle of a crowded restaurant, in front of hundreds of eyes. That man was named Tab Hunter, the handsome prince of Hollywood in the 1950s and 60s. An angelic face, an athlete's body, the ideal model for millions of American girls. But behind the glamour, he was a man torn between career ambitions and the fear of exposure. It was at that moment that Jim Nabors entered Tab's life, with a calm gaze, as if he saw through every layer of disguise. They met in June 1969 at a Warner Brothers charity auction. No introductions needed, only after Jim sang. Tab sent over a glass of whiskey with a handwritten note. "You are the only voice that makes me want to stay silent and listen forever." Just that one sentence. And Jim let his heart drift into this elusive romance. The two escaped to Montreal under the fake names Tony and Sam. In Oregon, they rented a small wooden house, waking up to walk in the forest together. In Santa Barbara, Jim secretly left a second toothbrush in the bathroom for Tab. Every small gesture showed Jim's trust, his hope for a home. But whenever Jim suggested living together, Tab just smiled, hugged tightly, and said, "You deserve to be loved, but I'm not sure I'm the one worthy to do it." Words that brought Jim to tears, but later, he realized it was just a way to delay. In December 1971, Jim returned to New York to film The Carol Burnett Show. He arranged to meet Tab at Candle 79 restaurant, where they had a romantic night the year before. But Tab didn't come. No call, no message. When Jim walked in, he froze. Tab Hunter was sitting 2 tables away, holding hands tightly with another man, David B., the notoriously promiscuous Broadway dancer. The two clinked glasses, laughed, leaned close to whisper in each other's ears. And then, right in the middle of the restaurant, they kissed as if there was nothing to hide. Jim stood stunned. He turned away, quietly left Candle 79, then sat for 3 hours in Central Park amid the falling snow. The next morning, he canceled all his work schedule. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, a small newspaper called Backstage Blinders released shocking news. It turned out Tab's manager had paid $3,500 to hire paparazzi to capture the romantic scene between Tab and David B. at Candle 79. The whole thing was staged, not love, but just to quash rumors that Tab was secretly seeing Jim Nabors. The most painful thing wasn't the betrayal, but the fax sent to Jim's manager's office just 2 days later. On it was only one sentence: "Don't make things worse. You've been chosen. Now it's time to withdraw." Jim didn't cry. In the diary, he only wrote, "I didn't love Tab Hunter. I only loved an image he created to survive. And in that play, I was just the shadow behind the curtains." From then on, he began to feel like a pawn on an invisible chessboard. Arranged, controlled. Every time he turned to music to soothe the pain, every door slammed shut. Even the recording studio where he recorded changed schedules, just to avoid him accidentally meeting Tab again. After the shock in New York with Tab Hunter, Jim Nabors disappeared from showbiz for nearly a year. He lived quietly in a small apartment in West Hollywood, away from the stage lights. But it was then that strange handwritten letters began to appear. Purple paper, ink scented with perfume, always signed L. At first, just a few words praising his voice, then gradually becoming long, enchanting paragraphs. By the 10th letter, Jim realized the person behind it was none other than Liberace, the most glamorous piano king of the 1970s. When he accepted the invitation to a birthday party at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Jim stepped into a world he had never imagined. Glittering lights, dazzling diamonds, and from the first moment, Liberace gave him a $20,000 diamond ring with the words, "I don't need anyone else but you." The following weeks, Jim was swept into a whirlwind of luxury. Private jets taking them everywhere, a piano covered in snakeskin ready in the villa, Italian chefs serving every meal, lavish gifts from gold watches to rare fur coats. To outsiders, Jim seemed to be living in a dream, but that dream quickly turned into a gilded cage. Liberace set invisible rules. Jim couldn't leave the hotel without permission. All calls were recorded for security reasons. Even personal letters were checked before going out. The climax was when Jim discovered a hidden microphone in the air vent right in his bedroom. Panicked, Jim fled in the night. A week later, tabloids simultaneously published anonymous articles accusing Jim of exploiting older artists to climb the fame ladder. The articles even included a photoshopped photo of him semi-nude by the Caesars Palace pool, a photo that never existed. RCA Records immediately postponed the new album release. In the diary, Jim wrote only a cold line: "Nothing hurts more than escaping a manipulator, but then the whole world believes you are the betrayer." From here, Jim's career nearly froze. He appeared less, sang less, and lived in fear of further humiliation, but fate still wouldn't let go. In the fall of 1974, an old friend returned, a colleague bonded from the early days. familiar on the small screen with satirical laughter and sharp comedic acting. That person was Paul Lynde, a name familiar to American TV audiences in the 1970s. He was famous for his satirical comedy, resounding laughter on Hollywood squares, and cheerful image on camera. But behind the velvet curtain, Paul was an unstable, lonely person, obsessed with the fear of being forgotten. Jim Nabors knew Paul from their humble beginnings. They once roamed on cheap tours, slept in rundown motels, shared meager paychecks. They were close friends, even like brothers. But by 1974, after Jim escaped the terrifying shadow of Liberace, that friendship took a different turn. One late night in Palm Springs, amid alcohol and tears, Paul confessed that he had loved Jim since the 1960s. After so many breakups, Jim believed this could be the final harbor. No luxury, no diamond rings, just a companion who understood him from the roots. Jim moved in with Paul at the small apartment on La Jolla Avenue. At that time, he thought he had found peace. But the truth emerged quickly. Just after 2 months, Paul revealed a pathological controlling nature. Jim couldn't go out without reporting first. He couldn't laugh too long with male colleagues. Even fan letters from men were torn up by Paul right in front of him. Once, when seeing Jim receive a letter from a male fan in Portland, Paul angrily smashed a $5,000 Tiffany lamp and screamed, "Only I have the right to write to you." Jim tried to endure, but in June 1975, everything exploded. Backstage after filming Hollywood Squares, Paul accidentally discovered a call in Jim's phone from Fred, the makeup artist. In a violent fit of jealousy, Paul shoved. Jim lost control and pushed back. Paul fell face first into the corner of the dressing table, leaving a bruise around his eye. On TV that evening, Paul appeared with a swollen, bruised face, explaining to the press that he slipped in the bathroom. But in the diary, Jim wrote, "That was the first time, and the only time in my life I hit someone. I cried all night, like a scared child." The next morning, Jim moved out of the apartment, leaving no note. He thought it was over. But a few months later, an anonymous letter was sent. Inside was a photo of Jim with another actor, taken from afar while being followed. On the back of the photo was a short line, "Try smiling again." Jim didn't sign it, but deep down, he knew who it came from. After that, Jim's heart nearly closed shut. He was afraid, lost faith, and thought he would never dare to love again. But then, destiny brought another person. At the end of 1984, Jim met Raymond at a charity performance in Los Angeles. Unlike previous romances, this time everything started very gently. After Jim finished singing a song, he quietly left the stage because he was tired. Raymond approached, gave him a cup of hot tea, and said, "Your voice hugs me." That sentence opened a relationship that Jim thought was finally the peace he had found. They lived together in West Hollywood, raised a small dog named Cookie, and even secretly planned to move to Vancouver, where laws and society were more open. Jim sold some assets, canceled the fall tour to prepare for the new start. For him, this wasn't just a trip, but a dream of a normal home where he and Raymond could live true to themselves. But just 1 week before departure, Raymond began to change. He often came home late, citing meetings at the studio, then disappearing for hours. Once, Jim called the office and learned Raymond had left early. In Raymond's coat pocket, Jim found a hotel bill under a fake name and a strange pill blister. From that moment, he knew everything was cracking. The night before the flight, Jim waited for Raymond to come home for dinner, but instead of promises, he only found in the coffee jar a tissue paper with trembling handwriting, "Sorry, you'll be happier without living as a shadow. Hollywood needs me, and you, live for yourself." Jim didn't cry. He just quietly folded the tissue, packed his luggage, and the next morning still went to the airport. Waiting at gate 27, Raymond didn't appear, and never appeared again. 2 weeks later, the Globe newspaper published a photo of Raymond holding hands with a young actor named Luke M. at a private party in Malibu. The whole world implicitly understood that the one replaced was Jim. In the diary, he wrote, "The pain isn't losing Raymond. The pain is realizing, from the beginning, I was never the choice. A close friend later recounted that he had never seen Jim drink as much as during that period. He even bought strong sedatives, but never used them. In Jim's bedside drawer until his death in 2017, there was still the unused plane ticket to Vancouver. On the back, he wrote a short line: "Some dreams don't die because they don't come true. They die because people made me believe they were once real." And so the final love story closed, not with an argument, not with a scandal, but with an endless void, a void that made Jim Nabors never dare to open his heart again. When closing Jim Nabors' 132-page diary, we don't just see unfinished love stories. We also see an arduous journey of a person always seeking the simplest thing, to be loved and to live true to that love. Each name in the diary carries a different shape of pain. Rock Hudson left the wound of betrayal. Anthony Perkins left the wound of silence. Tab Hunter left the wound of staged drama. Liberace left the wound of manipulation. Lynde left the wound of mad jealousy. And Raymond Burr left the wound of a buried dream, all combined into a tragic picture of Hollywood, where glittering lights aren't enough to dispel the darkness in human hearts. But above all, what chokes us is the patience and kindness in Jim's soul. He never turned himself into a bitter person. Despite going through one after another, he kept his heart soft, still knew how to cry, to remember, to hope. And that makes him a truly beautiful person, not on stage, but in the fragility of everyday life. Perhaps what Jim leaves for us is not just laughter, not just songs, but a silent question sent to every generation. Is love worth hiding? Does happiness truly come to everyone? That's not just Jim Nabors' sentiment. It's also the sentiment of countless hearts that had to live in silence through many decades. The story of Jim Nabors and his secret romances is not just a hidden corner of Hollywood, but a mirror reflecting human loneliness and longing for love. 6 romances, 6 wounds, and a life that closed in silence. If you think this story deserves to be known by more people, so no one is forgotten behind the glamour, please press like on this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories about the secrets behind Hollywood's velvet curtain. In your opinion, among those 6 men, who hurt Jim Nabors the most? And if given the chance, what do you think Jim would say about his last love in life? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening. We'll meet again in the next video.